You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's 50th Anniversary Rewatch of Star Trek, in which we look at all 729 episodes from beginning to end. I'm Mike from Stage 9.
And I am Brandon from Melodic Treks.
And today we're going to talk about two Star Trek adventures, the first being the second Next Generation feature film, First Contact, and the second being the Voyager episode, The Q and the Gray. So let's get started with First Contact. Brandon, you want to give a synopsis of this episode?
Captain Picard is put on the sidelines when the Borg come and invade Sector 001 again, and he decides to disobey orders and join the fight, and he finds that the Borg are using a temporal displacement phenomenon field Technobabble 47 and to go back in time, and so he decides to follow in their wake, and they discover that they're going to try and prevent first contact with some unknown race, and they have to prevent the Borg from preventing first contact.
So what did you think about this movie?
The first time I saw this movie in theaters, so Generations is my movie, and I love Generations. I think it's great. I lived in La Ronge, Saskatchewan, and we had a theater that only played movies on the weekend. And Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we had Generations, and I went all 3 nights. But the theater closed down, so in order for me to watch First Contact, I actually had to take a bus to Saskatoon, which was 8 hours away, in order for me to go and see this movie. And I got to the theater and went to see it on opening night, and I didn't really enjoy it the first time that I watched it. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I think because I love Generations so much. It's grown on me a lot over time as time has gone on, and I've seen it more and more. And it is a really good movie, and I really, really, really enjoy it. There's a lot of wonderful things about it. But it's not my favorite one, and I know that it's most people's favorite one.
Yeah, I mean, First Contact, there was, Generations was the first movie that I saw, in the theater, like on opening night or whatever, and of all movies, pretty much, not just Star Trek movies. And First Contact was definitely one that I was looking forward to as much as I was looking forward to Generations in a lot of ways, because, this is still sort of like the golden years of Trek. And I went to see, the special sneak preview on Thursday night with my Uncle Gene and my cousin Alex, and at the Oak Brook Theater, which no longer exists, and it was amazing. I loved it, and I loved a lot of things about it in ways that to me, I know that people say like this is the best Next Generation movie. And at the time, I was like, this is way better than Generations, because in a lot of ways it sort of like solved the problems that Generations had. And, over the years, I think sort of my love for Generations as its sort of place in my personal movie history has sort of made me think like, that's, I think that's my favorite. Like I when I was getting Ron Moore and Brandon Braga to sign a Laserdisc for me, the Laserdisc that I chose was Generations, not First Contact, and because it's like significant to me. But when I watched First Contact, which I did on September 8th for the 50th anniversary, you look at it and you look at the skill and the craftsmanship involved in it, and it is clearly the best of the Next Generation movies. It's really, really great. And I know that it has a lot of problems in terms of logic with the time travel, that it basically doesn't make any sense at all. But the fact that you're not concerned with that while you're watching it, the fact that it's so exciting and riveting, and there's so much great character stuff going on, that you're not really paying attention to the massive, massive plot holes, really also speaks to the overall quality of the movie. And, I don't really see them as being a problem, because it more than makes up for it. I think a lot of, you can sort of be like a bean counter and say like this episode has this problem and this problem and this problem and this doesn't make any sense. And it's like, while all that is true, if while you're watching it, that doesn't matter and you're getting a lot out of it, despite those problems, so much so that you don't care about those problems, then ultimately I think those problems are irrelevant, and that's kind of how I feel about the problems with First Contact. I love it. And Jonathan Frakes is such an amazing director. This is easily the best movie he's ever directed, and his visual style is perfect. I love the photography by Matthew, what's his name? He's got like 4 brothers who are all cinematographers. Leonetti, thank you. And he is so great. He's such a great cinematographer. I love his work in pretty much everything. He shot Strange Days for Catherine Bigelow. It's fantastic. And his lighting is so crisp and everything. And it's great. And also putting a pin in something for tomorrow, it's very clear to me that Alien was a huge influence on this movie. I mean, we all know that Brandon Braga is a big fan of horror films and whatnot, and you can clearly see the Alien influence here. And I like it. It's a good movie.
I feel about this movie like I do about Beyond. Like, I know that everybody's touting about how great Beyond was, and it's like, yeah, it was fine. It was, I don't have anything really bad to say about this movie, and I don't really have anything bad to say about Beyond. It's just, it's okay. It's kind of in the average for me, Like, I agree with you, and there are so many movies out there where people like to point out the inconsistencies and the things that don't work for them, and those don't bother me. It's fun to point them out, and it's funny when you think about them. But when you're watching the movie, usually I don't pay attention to those kind of inconsistencies, and it doesn't bother me, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
But Patrick Stewart's acting in this is absolutely fantastic. The scene when he's with Lily and he's like cleaning that stuff and he's trying to build that little thing and he gets all mad and he smashes the ships, and like he's outstanding in it. And James Cromwell is a very, very good Zephram Cochrane in this episode. There's some silly hokey stuff. Like, I don't really like the drunk Troy scene, and I don't really like Ooby Dooby in it, and I don't really like Magic Carpet Ride in it. Like, there's things that I don't like in it.
I like all those things. Those are like my 3 favorite things. Anyway,
I'm glad. But yeah, it's a fine romp in the silver screen adventures of the Starship Enterprise E.
Excellent. All right, should we move on to our next episode for today?
The Q and the Gray.
Yes, this is the episode where Q comes aboard the Voyager and says, "Hey, Janeway, let's have a baby." And Janeway says, "That doesn't sound like a good idea." And then alternate Q, Susie Plaxon Q, comes aboard and is like, "Hey, what you doing? Stepping out on me," or whatever the terminology is. This is not cool. And it's revealed that because of the events in the other Q episode that we saw on Voyager, the Q continuum is in the midst of a civil war, and only Janeway can help the Q or something, and try to stop the violence. So yeah, that's the episode. Well, what do you think about the Q and the Gray?
Most people in fandom that I've heard over the last year say that there's only one good Q episode on Voyager, and that's Death Wish. And I don't know. I don't agree. I think this episode is just fine. It's a good expansion on what we saw in Death Wish, with seeing the Q continuum and trying to perceive it, and this is how we would perceive it. I think that's really, really, really neat. And it's interesting that we have ramifications from that previous episode with Quinn's suicide. So I enjoy this episode every time that I watch it. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is cool how they expand on the mythology, and how, Death Wish, which was a very cool episode, has had a lasting impact on the Q continuum for sure. I think that that's really neat. And I also like the idea of portraying, well, I like the idea, for one thing, of there being a Q civil war, but I also like the idea of them portraying that civil war in a tangible way. in a way that makes sense to us as viewers, and also to the Voyager crew as humans. And I think that's sort of really interesting and cool, because if you think about it, in a lot of ways, that's what Star Trek does. It's a proxy for the real world, and it's presenting issues that we're dealing with today in a way that we can understand them by setting them in the 24th century. So it's kind of interesting in that regard, sort of a metatextual thing. And I think it's very effective. I think there's times where it's kind of dumb, like when, you've got Voyager people running around shooting these weapons as accurately or whatever as they would if they were trained with them and not phasers. And also the idea that this war, this abstraction of a Q war, is so literal in a sense that, like, a human can pick up a gun and have the weapon of a Q. That kind of thing, that sort of doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But it works. I think it's a very good episode.
Yeah, and it's neat to see other Q. Like in The Next Generation, all that we ever saw for other Q was Corbin Burnson quickly came in Deja Q, and then that blonde girl in True Q quickly, right at the end, she decided to become a Q. And that's really all that we saw of other Q. We didn't get an expansion as to what the Q are, so we only have John Delancey's portrayal of a Q to fall back on for the majority of the time that we see them. And here we're seeing that not all the Q are John Delancey and how he portrays them. They are different, right? Some of them are the same, but some of them are different. We got this general on the opposite side who's a completely different type of character than John Delancey is.
Yeah, although, I really do like Susie Plaxton's portrayal. I think the idea of casting her as a Q, I think, is kind of perfect. And I think that her interaction with John Delancey is also pretty perfect. It has very much sort of a screwball comedy, His Girl Friday sort of vibe going on with the two of them that works really well.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that pretty much wraps up today. First Contact in the Q and the Gray. Any places where people can find you on the internet, Brandon?
Other than eagerly waiting for tomorrow's episode of From There to Here, because there's 2 great episodes coming up, you can find me here on the network with new episodes of Melodic Treks, which is all about the music of Star Trek. And you can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Mutala, and every once in a while I poke my head up in the Babel Conference. And where can people find you, Mike?
You can find me right here on Trek FM doing Stage 9 with John Mills, where we talk about the people who make Star Trek. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. All right, well, that's it for today. But the two of us will be back tomorrow with an episode of Voyager and an episode of Deep Space Nine, Macrocosm, and Rapture.